Kelly Lawson, a poor flower seller, was on cloud nine when she married a rich man who loved her. She just didn't expect to find out what her husband had done a year earlier. When the truth came out, the woman felt like vomiting and ran to call the police. Kelly placed flowers on her mother's grave and covered her face to hide the tears making trails on her face. It had been over a year since the death of her mother, Emily Lawson, and the woman still couldn't come to terms with what had happened so tragically and suddenly. But while the pain from the loss was difficult, the pain that tore at Kelly's heart was knowing that the man who had hit her mother while she crossed the street on the crosswalk was still at large, walking around and going about his life as if nothing had happened. And now, looking at Emily's grave, she remembered the accident that orphaned her and couldn't hold back the tears of longing and hatred. She didn't understand why it had to happen precisely to her mother, but since that fact was unchangeable now, Kelly wondered if it was better to give up on trying to get any justice in this world. Everything indicated that nothing would happen to the person who recklessly took the life of her mother. Kelly had gone to the police several times about the case, but never got the person responsible for the hit and run arrested, even for one night. A death had occurred, and arresting the person who took someone's life was the least they should do, she thought. Seeing that she was getting nowhere, she decided to hire a lawyer who investigated the case for her and discovered what could be the motive for the police officer's inertia. The man who killed her mother came from a wealthy family. Not only did he own several businesses in the city, but he also had relatives with a lot of political influence. The man's parents used every connection they could to ensure their son was not prosecuted. And so, more than a year after Emily's death, he had not been arrested, and the officials forgot the case against him. Kelly, who ended up alone after her mother's accident, was the only one who continued to suffer in this whole story. Without the resources to stand up to the man's family, she could see no way out of her misfortune. Then Kelly sighed, said goodbye to her mother's grave, and walked out of the cemetery, passing the gravestones of unknown people. Each of these visits to the graveyard left Kelly devastated, feeling helpless and distressed. She imagined her mother's soul wasn't getting any peace since she had not yet seen justice done in this world. Kelly Lawson had lived with her mother all her life. She never knew her father, and when she asked about him at home, her mother never wanted to give many details about him. She didn't even know his name, and Kelly was bullied at school because of it. She never forgot how her classmates mocked and ridiculed her for being poor and not having a father. Several other children in the school didn't have their fathers at home either, but at least they all knew their names. Kelly had no idea who he was, what he was doing, or where he might be. Her life was difficult, and her mother did what she could to put food on the table and clothes on their backs. Emily, Kelly's mother, worked as a cleaner in one of those roadside motels, and her salary wasn't enough to provide her daughter with everything she needed or wanted. Soon after being abandoned by the father of her child, the woman had no choice but to rent an old house on the outskirts of town and live there with her baby girl still wearing diapers. When she finished high school, Kelly could not get into college. Emily wanted her daughter to study and have a career and a better life, but reality didn't allow the young woman to dream very high. Kelly understood the situation and always knew she would have no way of going to college. So, when she finished her studies, she would look for a job and help with the household bills. Then perhaps, she and her mother would have a little more dignified life. Bills started piling up, and Emily had to pick up night shifts at the motel for a little extra income. She worked day and night, hardly ever taking a break. "We are going to stabilize our lives, and then, when we have some extra money, I'll go to college. You'll see," Kelly promised her mother. However, fate had other plans for the two, and Emily would never see her dream of seeing her daughter graduate come true. After her mother's death, Kelly distributed dozens of resumes to try and find a job, but most of her attempts didn't even result in an interview, much less a job offer. Her hopes were waning when she was finally struck with some luck. She was passing a flower shop when she saw a flyer on the door offering work. Kelly didn't think it would go anywhere. After all, she had no experience growing or selling flowers, but she went in anyway and saw rooms full of life, color, and the most fantastic blend of fragrances. It was a wonderfully tranquil and pleasant environment. She never imagined that a flower shop could be so interesting. She would love to work in such a place. Her eyes shined as she looked around, and the store owner couldn't help but notice. When she said she was there about a job offer on the flyer, the florist immediately offered her the position. "Up to now, you're the only one who has come in, and I see how our flowers enchant you," he said. Of course, Kelly was happy about the opportunity. She would have a trial month with a rather low salary, but at least he paid on time, and she could buy a few things she needed. Kelly was ecstatic with her new job and loved working with the roses, daisies, bromeliads, lilies, and orchids. Initially, she was a timid salesperson, presenting what was in the store and allowed the customer to decide what was best, as she didn't know much about the flowers there. Even making the bouquets proved challenging to do alone. But one day, she was alone in the store and had to create a rather complex bouquet for a wealthy customer who was to take the flowers to his mother in the hospital. She did her best and made a bouquet that the customer adored. "Wow, how beautiful. You really have a vocation for this," said the man, so impressed with the arrangement that he paid a little extra for the young woman. From that day on, word of mouth in the neighborhood made her work so famous that they began to call her the Flower Fairy. Sales at the flower shop grew tremendously, giving Kelly plenty of work to show how skilled she was. The insecurity she once felt was gone, and she accepted the idea that working with flowers could be her vocation. The store owner shined now when he looked at his young prodigy. His new florist, who had entered his store entirely by chance, had tripled his flower sales in just a few months. Once, Kelly was working on another original bouquet when a young man tall as a basketball player entered the store, looked around, and then laid eyes on the working florist. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked. "You're already helping me. That bouquet is for my mother, who's turning 50 today," said the young man with a smile. That's when Kelly understood that he was the man who had called earlier asking for this bouquet. His name was Holden, and he was the son of a very wealthy couple. While he waited patiently, he didn't pressure her and proved to be a polite guy. Using lilies and some daisies, she outdid herself and made the prettiest bouquet of the day. "I hope your mom likes them," she said. Nick's eyes opened wide in appreciation when he saw the finished product. He liked them and was surprised that something so simple could be so beautiful. He gave her a $100 bill to show his appreciation and said to keep the change. "But sir, that's too much," protested Kelly, not knowing how to react. But Nick would not go back on his decision. Instead, he took the flower arrangement and walked to the exit. He paused briefly in the doorway, looked back, and said goodbye to the florist. She was excited. With the extra money he gave her, she could go shopping that weekend to buy the dress she had wanted for so long. When she saw herself in the mirror, she thought of how long it had been since she had been so beautiful. She had forgotten what it was like to dress up. Because of her new job, Kelly was getting some pleasure out of life again. She no longer felt so sad remembering her dead mother, nor angry at knowing the assassin was out there somewhere. Things were finally getting back on track. However, Kelly didn't yet know that her path would cross again with that wealthy young man and change her life forever. 2 weeks later, Holden went to the flower shop at lunchtime. Kelly was leaving and Nick asked her to get some lunch together. His unexpected invitation was so confident she couldn't say no. So Nick took Kelly to a restaurant he went to often. It was a place with expensive and sophisticated dishes. The lunch went without any problems. Nick was charming and at no moments made the young woman uncomfortable for not knowing the dishes and their ingredients. Instead, he was patient and liked to hear what she had to say. The meal seemed like a scene in a romantic movie. By the time they brought desserts, it was clear that Nick and Kelly were interested in each other. On their fourth lunch together, before letting Kelly out of the car to go back to work, Nick kissed Kelly for the first time. Now, their relationship was sealed. Everything went so well that after only 8 months, they decided to move in together. As Kelly's rented house was small and modest, Nick convinced his parents to let them live in the family mansion. Despite Kelly's fear of not adjusting to his family and their lifestyle, Nick's parents, Ned and Sheila Holden, turned out to be friendly people who did what they could to make their son's fiancé feel at home and welcome. They weren't rich snobs, and perhaps precisely because they didn't have to worry about money, paid no attention to her tight financial situation. They said that maybe now, living there without paying rent, she would be able to save some money and build her net worth. Ned and Sheila always said they worked hard to get where they were, and knowing how to save was one of the lessons that helped them most in their first years as entrepreneurs. To this day, I value every dollar I deposit in my savings or that I use to invest, said Ned to his daughter-in-law. I can tell you are smart, Kelly, and you won't throw money away. We will always be here to advise you if you want, said Sheila. The young couple was wildly in love, and it didn't take long before Kelly started to feel nauseous and started going to the bathroom more frequently. She bought a test at a pharmacy and it showed she was pregnant. Nick couldn't contain his happiness when he found out. He called his friends and family that same night to tell them the news. "You think it'll be a boy? If so, he'll be a basketball guard like I was in college," he said. "Oh, it's a boy all right. I can feel these things," said Sheila Holden with an enigmatic smile. Kelly felt so comfortable with those people that she forgot her humble background full of suffering. So different from the luxury and good life these people were used to. Another striking difference was that Nick, her fiancé, had 2 parents still alive, living with him and helping and supporting him with anything he needed. She, on the other hand, never had a father and lost her mother. And so, except for her fiancé and now the fetus developing inside her, Kelly still had no family in the world. Months later, reflecting on this history, the expectant mother couldn't contain her emotions and started to cry. When her in-laws asked what was wrong, Kelly told them the tragic story of Emily Lawson, her mother, who was killed. And until now, the killer roamed freely, When she mentioned her mother's name, Sheila Holden grew pale and covered her mouth. Kelly noticed her mother-in-law's shock and asked if everything was okay. Sheila quickly dropped her hand, tried to act naturally, saying it was a real tragedy, and tried changing the subject to something more positive. She also mentioned how negative emotions could affect the baby. Kelly thought her reaction was strange, but decided not to make a big deal out of it. But she started to pay more attention to her in-laws. That night, walking down one of the mansion's hallways, she overheard a suspicious conversation between Sheila and Ned. "She's Emily Lawson's daughter. Do you know what that means, Ned? Think about the situation our son is in now. And if she discovers everything?" asked the older woman. "Who could have imagined something like this? What are we going to do? She's a good person. Nick loves her, and she's pregnant with our grandchild," Ned pointed out. Now, Kelly understood everything and didn't need to hear another word. She ran to her room, feeling sick and holding back her tears. Then, without thinking of her future, she took her bags out of the closet and began packing them to leave. "There's no way I can keep sleeping with the man who killed my mother," she thought, full of rage. "How did this happen? How did I end up here? I'm calling the police." Nick arrived home late that day. When he arrived, it was already dark and Kelly was no longer there. He got worried when he saw the bedroom all messed up and his fiance's clothes missing. He searched throughout the house, talked with his parents, made calls, and drove around in his car looking for her, but he found no trace of his future wife. Kelly was in her 7th month of pregnancy, and her situation was delicate. It wasn't good to be out on her own with no support. Unsuccessful in his search, Nick returned home, and only then his parents told him that Kelly was the daughter of Emily Lawson, the woman who had died 2 years ago in that fatal accident Nick was involved in. "But it wasn't my fault. I need to tell her this," Nick shouted at his parents. And so, every day, Nick would drive around the city looking for his fiancée and the baby she was carrying. But it was as if Kelly had vanished. 2 months later, Nick felt like the worst person in the world. Not only had his fiancée left him, but his child was about to be born, and he, the father, would not be there. So he started to look for her in all the hospitals and police stations in the city. One day, one of the maternity wards informed him that Kelly Lawson had been admitted, but she was a homeless woman who began having contractions on the street. Nick didn't wait another minute. Traffic was intense, so he ran through the streets like never before to get to the maternity ward as soon as possible. Arriving there, he saw that she had been put in a sparse room with no equipment or even a window. Clearly someone with no priority. Nick immediately demanded she be transferred to the best wing of the hospital, full of equipment and the best doctors. An hour later, the delivery room filled with the cries of a newborn. It was a girl who had come into the world, and she was perfect. Entering the room and seeing Kelly holding his daughter, Nick went to her and held her hand. Before she could kick him out of the room, he said it was all a colossal misunderstanding. "I know you think I ran over your mother, but it wasn't me. It was my brother, Jason. He was always a troubled guy, but he was never the same after that accident." He blamed himself and went into a deep depression before fleeing to Canada. On the flight home, he rode in a coffin. "Both the accident and my brother's death devastated our family for over a year. I don't know how life's mysteries work, but the first person to take me out of that nightmare was you, my love. Even in our pain, we are connected," he said, his voice breaking. Receiving such news so soon after the excitement of having a baby left Kelly somewhat confused. She wanted to cry and smile at the same time, and she had never seen Nick so vulnerable. "I overheard your parents talking, and I thought it was you. I almost called the police, but it would be my word against your whole family. I didn't know about your brother. I really should have talked with you instead of taking off like that." By this time, tears were streaming down her face. The baby wriggled in her arms, and she kissed its forehead. "Look, come see our little girl," she said to Nick, who could finally see his baby for the first time. He stroked the baby's head and said, "Let's call her Emily, like your mother. Our family will honor her and protect our daughter wherever she goes for the rest of our lives." Kelly hugged her fiancé and the baby. Now, little Emily depended on her moving on in life with less resentment and hatred inside, and more determination and love, exactly like her mother Emily had done for her. Kelly called Nick close to her and whispered, "I love you. I love you both." If you like this story, please leave a like. You'll also enjoy the video appearing on screen now. Have a great day, and see you in the next video.